Good morning. My name is Guy Torres. Most of you will know me as an historian and archaeologist, and of late a rather controversial political writer. You'll also know that I have absolutely no time for multiculturalism and political correctness. In these series of lectures which I'm about to unfold to you, I'm going to talk about the growth and development of the Roman Empire. Now, most historians today, and most people I know in the archaeological field, don't like getting mixed up in politics. I think that's a pity, because in order to be a good politician, indeed a good archaeologist, you need to be political, or one needs to be political. Let's face it, history and archaeology are about, above all, politics. For example, when I look at a Roman town in Britain, I immediately think to myself, I wonder why this was put here. What was the reason d'etre for it? If you look at Colchester, for example, it was a Roman military colony for veterans of the 20th Balearic victories. The implanting of a colony of Roman citizens, even if retired Roman soldiers, was a political act. So that means when people like me come to dig up ancient Colchester, we're digging up a political statement. So I don't quite understand why it is that modern historians and lecturers are reluctant to get involved in politics, especially historical and archaeological politics. I would like to change that. The period that I find most fascinating from the point of view of these lectures are in fact the period from the defeat of Hannibal in the 201 BC to the time of Trajan of the year 100. To me, this is the height of the classical Roman period, wherein we see the last remnants of the Republic growing into a fully fledged imperial domain. Today we have the European Union, which is trying to impose itself upon the 27 or 26 states of Europe via an ethos of multiculturalism and political correctness. I can tell you now that it will fail. Okay, it may last maybe 20-30 years, but it has absolutely nothing to bind it together. It has no national ethos essential for building empires. Sure enough, the European bureaucrats in Brussels may be trying to develop a European consciousness, and sure enough, one could say that we share a European culture, but the history of Europe, I would say, tells a very different story. Unfortunately, bureaucrats, like most of today's politicians, don't read history and archaeology, so they're left to people like me to try to correct the balance. Cicero, or Marcus Tullius Cicero to give him his correct name, stated that a man who had no history had no country, and he was right. In fact, I would say that a people who have no history have no empire or European Union. If the clowns that had decided to found the European Union had read their history books properly, they would have realised that the chances of a European state evolving out of 27 different nationalities, cultures and languages was pretty much impossible, unless of course you imposed it as an ideological totalitarian state, which is what I think they tried to do. They've also made one other major mistake, in that they have tried to develop an ethos whereby communities, as we call this much abused word, are allowed to be themselves, follow their own customs, culture and dress and food within nation states. And I think this has been deliberately designed so as to try at least to found a multicultural European entity. Well, it's not going to work. The idea of multiculturalism itself came out of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, which, riven by nationalist sentiments and a pretty rocky foundation, was threatened with extinction towards the end of the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th. Some bright spark within the Austro-Hungarian hegemony decided that it might be a good idea to encourage national entities within things as small as cities, or as small as counties, or whatever the Austro-Hungarians had, in order that it would break up any national consciousness. Unfortunately, it stimulated the very thing that they were trying to prevent national consciousness. It's not a very good idea to break up people into the national entities, because isolated national entities living in cosmopolitan cities like Vienna or anywhere else generally tend to stick to themselves. In fact, today we see the modern phenomenon in Britain, where millions of imported Muslims have so far failed to integrate completely with the native British culture, and I think this will continue. In fact, if anything is guaranteed to break up a state, it's to implant colonies of foreigners in them, with a national conscious or religious ethos of their own. Especially if you're trying to found a multicultural empire like the European Union, it simply will not work. If you want an empire or a state to survive, especially an international state or a pan-national state, you need a national ethic or ethos in order to bind people together. You also need a language. A Roman in the year 200 AD, especially an upper-class Roman, could have travelled from Hadrian's Wall right the way down to Iraq, and he would have found that most people spoke a form of Latin or Greek, sometimes both, especially if he was educated. But he would also find a concept called the Greek state, or the city-state, which is actually a Greek idea, but was actually adopted by the Romans, a city-state. In each of these city-states, they would normally be ruled by a senate or an oligarchy, and they would preserve Greco-Roman civilization right across the empire. These city-states were the centre and hub of life. Now, in these series of lectures, I'm going to be talking to you about how the Romans achieved this. And I have to say right here and now, some of my views will probably upset the politically correct and ideologues. Well, that's unfortunate, because for once, you're going to be told the truth. Not my truth, your truth, or anybody else's truth, but the truth. There is a difference. In fact, an ontological, self-evident truth is what I'm actually going to be talking from. The Romans succeeded because they imposed Romanness upon the known world. They insisted that the conquered, the tribes, the cities, the municipia, the villages or pagus, assimilated into good Romans, and if you didn't, you remained an underclass. In the year 212 AD, so successful was the Romanization of the Roman Empire that the Emperor Caracalla was able to state that all freeborn inhabitants of the Roman Empire were to become Roman citizens, which up until then had been a prized gift in the hands of the establishment. If you're a Roman citizen prior to that time, you were privileged indeed. Now, this is just a prologue and a test video to see the response. And if you wish to receive the whole 20, please let me know by email. Please send them to guy11torres@hotmail.co.uk. guy11torres@hotmail.co.uk. In these series of lectures, which will be about 20, I shall look at the foundation of the Republic, and I shall also show that the ethos which eventually generated the successful story of the Roman Empire actually started in the days of the kings, when the Romans actually assimilated peoples around them. When you think then today that we are so keen to preserve people's cultural differences, the Roman attitude seems incredibly enlightened. In other words, they would take a conquered people and then encourage them to become good Romans to enjoy the benefits of Roman civilization. I have to say, on balance, they were probably right. Thank you until next time then.